Halo 2 is the greatest video game ever created, but its development was far from great. In fact, to put it lightly, its development was absolutely horrific. After the game's first debut at E3 2003, Bungie returned to the studio with the painful realization that the game just didn't work. And so they had to scrap almost the entire thing and start from scratch with just over a year left until release. What we got in the end was ultimately a masterpiece, but because of its rough development, Halo 2 has an astounding amount of content that was cut, never to see the light of day. Until now. The original version of Halo 2's campaign has now been restored, complete with almost every cut feature, weapon, vehicle, enemy, encounter, and so much more still left in the files. This absolutely iconic creation comes courtesy of the legend Vengeful Vadam, who's just released his mod, Halo 2 Uncut. And today, I want to go through this mod and highlight some of my absolute favourite elements of Halo 2's original campaign. So, let's dive into the alternate universe where Halo 2's development wasn't done on Lasso.
Humans fighting alongside elites? What's next? Front hierarchs? For all I have seen today, I would not be surprised.
Starting out on Cairo Station, one of the first things that you're going to notice is the HUD. It's different. Now, Halo 2 always had a slightly weird looking HUD in that the shields were, for some reason, above the motion tracker. I mean, I personally never disliked this, but originally Bungie intended for the HUD layout to be a lot more in line with what we saw in Combat Evolved. And that's what Vadam's done with the mod. The shields are now in the top right, the grenade indicator is in the top left next to your weapon, and dual weapons now stay side by side. Speaking of weapons, Cairo Station gives us our first look at two never-before-seen weapons that were cut from Halo 2. Firstly, the original BR. This thing is basically a DMR in BR form. It's semi-auto at all times, so unzoomed and zoomed in, with no ammo indicator. Now, having this thing in place of the BR is definitely like a cool insight into what could have been, but to be honest with you, I'm really happy that we got the BR that we ended up getting that was 3-shot burst. You guys know by now that I'm not really that much of a DMR fan. I'm a huge BR guy over a DMR guy, and so this version of the BR, albeit cool, doesn't really scratch that BR itch. What does scratch the itch though are these new melee animations. Now, Halo 2 was actually going to have this really cool and, in hindsight, extremely intuitive melee animation system where if you meleeed a weapon fast enough, instead of the animation just fully resetting and playing again, it had instead chained the animations together in a really fluid and natural looking style, and the madman Vadam has resurrected that system. As far as I can tell, it's only on the BR, but you know, it's really cool seeing the animations chained together like they do. They honestly look so fluid and so natural. You know, thinking about it, I can't even think about an FPS game, even a modern FPS game nowadays, that has an animation style with meleeing that's this intuitive and fluid, or even similar to this. I think this is just another example of Bungie making something that's inadvertently like decades ahead of the curve. And you know, on the topic of animations, let's talk about reload animations as well, because they have been massively improved. Now, when you run a mag dry and do a full reload, Chief actually pulls the charging handle back or hits the bolt catch to slide the bolt forward and chamber a new round, as you would with an actual gun. You know, it's a small detail, but for people out there like myself that like firearm stuff, this is like a real nice little touch that it's a shame never made it into the final release. Anyways, the second resurrected weapon is hands down one of the coolest things I think I've ever seen in Halo, the plasma cannon. Now, this is Halo 2's version of the plasma turret heavy weapon that we finally got to use in Halo 3, and you know what? I'm not gonna lie, I think I prefer Halo 2's cut version. Reach's plasma repeater kinda sorta tried to fill this first-person heavy plasma rifle role, but I really don't like that weapon. I think it fell completely flat. This, on the other hand, does not fall flat. Seriously, the plasma cannon absolutely nails the role of a heavy plasma rifle. It feels innately like a real heavy plasma cannon with massive bolts, much faster fire rate, and venting that's powerful enough to prevent it from ever overheating. I cannot tell you how satisfying it feels to mow down a horde of grunts or drones or even flood with this thing. It also just happens to look badass as well. Cherry on top. And you know, speaking of the grunts, a little thing that I noticed it may just be me head casing, so let me know if I am in the comments, but a little thing I noticed is that the grunts seem to have more green lights on them now. And you know, I kind of like it. It's only a small thing, and those lights are there in vanilla Halo 2. I just don't think as many of them are turned on the grunts methane pack, but having them all turned on just kind of makes the grunts stand out a little bit more on the battlefield. So if all of this is tickling your fantasy and you're looking for a damn fine PC to play it on, well, look no further than my own Flood-themed line of PCs made in partnership with Apex Gaming PCs. Choose from either the Pure Form, the Gravemind, or the super powerful Primordial build, and make sure to use code HIDDEN at checkout for up to $250 off your order. Outskirts starts with a bang. Instead of Marines, you're now accompanied by ODSTs, similar to Second Squad in the other Pelican that you go down to the city with. And when you crash, not only do the ODSTs fight with you through the streets, so too do the pilots, with their very marathon-esque flight helmets. But you don't move through the streets with a bang, rather, you move through the streets with a whisper, thanks to the new and functioning suppressed SMG. This thing actually works. You can stealth your way into the courtyard without the Covenant realizing you're there. It actually works. You'll see more of this later, but stealth was very clearly something that Bungie wanted to be more prominent in Halo 2, but didn't have the time or resources or whatever to make it happen. No longer. Something else that Bungie really wanted to make happen in Halo 2 that unfortunately they didn't end up getting round to until Reach was the Falcon. And it's here. Yes, this is the Halo 2 Falcon, and I gotta say, it is so cool having this thing swoop in and aid you in clearing out the courtyard, and then evac only the pilots and replace them with Marine reinforcements. And you know, the Falcon aside, as cool as this thing is, this is part of a series of changes that were absent from launch Halo 2 that Vadam's brought back in this mod, that make the world and the gameplay and your progression through the levels in this game feel more believable and more in line with the story. The whole game's story just feels more fluid and more fitting with the gameplay and the levels that you're going through because of these changes. And there are a ton more of them that, don't worry, we're going to cover as we go through the game. On a different, but equally as refreshing topic, Halo 2's Needler is no longer useless. I swear to God, the only reason we got the Halo 2 Needler that we ended up getting was because Bungie just didn't have enough time to give it some love. But don't worry, Vadam has given it that love, and now this thing is actually useful. Dual-wielding Needlers now? Man, you feel like Terminator. And you know, if that doesn't make you want to download this mod and also go and subscribe to Vadam's channel, then, man, I don't know what we'll do. Links are in the description. Go and do it now. Now, when I got to Metropolis and I started rolling over the bridge in the Scorpion, I noticed something pretty damn cool right away. Halo 2's Phantoms are now destructible. Granted, they don't quite have the flash and the quality of Halo 3's Phantom explosions. I mean, hell, not a single Halo game since Halo 3 has even matched Halo 3's Phantom explosions. But it's really cool to know that Bungie planned this now incredibly iconic feature quite a while in advance, and it's pretty cool playing through Halo 2 with the ability to at least try and detonate a Phantom. Now, something that I didn't know Bungie had planned, I've never seen this anywhere before, but if it's in this mod, then I trust that it was part of Bungie's original vision for Halo 2, is what I saw roll out of the tunnel when I got to the other side of the bridge.
They see me rolling, they hating.
Drones driving cars. You know, there was something about watching this and seeing the drones being sat on the roof of the car that had me absolutely howling. Genuinely hilarious. Into the tunnel, we see more of Bungie's scrapped plans for stealth, and this one is really cool because it's so contextual. The Covenant's invasion of the city has caused flooding, and you can crouch beneath the surface of the water in the partially submerged section of the tunnel to sneak around the Covenant, and again, it actually works. Don't get me wrong, active camouflage is really cool, but I love contextual stealth like this. It's something that I really hope gets resurrected in the next campaign. Towards the end of Metropolis, we meet the yin to the plasma cannon's yang, yet another heavy weapon that was cut from Halo 2, the GPMG. Again, this thing is really cool. I love the sound. It kind of just reminds me of an even faster firing M60. But I gotta say, my heart is with the plasma cannon. That thing's just too cool. Speaking of cool, you know what would be even cooler is if you subscribed right now. Go on, I know you want to. So, Arbiter starts out with something that is right up my alley. The cut gas creatures that were meant to fly around the gas mine have been restored. And you know, having now fully played Marathon and fully digested Marathon, I only now realise that these gas creatures are the same things that float around in the electric sheep levels of Marathon Infinity. Halo is at its absolute peak when it's referencing or linking back to Marathon, and you cannot convince me otherwise. As you enter the gas mine, another section that was clearly meant to be stealth originally is actually a stealth section again. You can sneak through the initial encounter if you take out the elites and grunts without alerting anybody, and you know, it really makes having camo as the Arbiter here feel like more than just a get out of jail free card when you're injured. It feels like an actual fleshed out mechanic. I love it. Sentinels are also present from the get-go here as well, which, you know, it just makes sense considering where you are. But when you pick up a carbine to take down the Sentinels, you'll notice that something pretty major is different. The carbine has been reverted back to its beta state, which is what the BR ended up being in another of Halo 2's many early iterations. So Bungie's original idea with the carbine was for it to be a 3-shot burst gun unscoped, and then a semi-auto rifle when scoped in, which is of course a mechanic that we later saw in Halo 4's light rifle. And I gotta say, I really like this thing. Hearing the Halo 2 carbine sound fired in 3-shot bursts, ooh, chills down the spine. But it's when we reach the Flood Lab of the Oracle that the fun really begins. Through the fog beneath the glass floor, you can see the piece de la resistance of cut Halo 2 content mauling its way through heretics. The Flood Juggernaut. But more on him in a second. I was really pleasantly surprised to see that the infection forms have had a bunch of what I think are cut animations restored as well. They aren't as static anymore. When they jump at you, you can see each individual leg and tentacle moving independently, which is really creepy. Gives me extreme facehugger vibes, and it just adds to the already existing creepy vibe of this level. Something else that Verdam's fixed from the release version of Halo 2 is that now, Artas, Halfjaw, actually follows you through the level. He doesn't just dip out after the first room. He even follows you around with restored cut dialogue as well, which, you know, is even better. But what's coolest here is absolutely the Flood Juggernaut fight, which the elites announce and talk throughout.
It comes! Prepare yourself, Arbiter! Knock off our every assault! It must have a weak spot!
The Juggernaut acts as a mini-boss battle in kind of the same way as Halo 3's Chieftains did, just on steroids. The Juggernaut's weak spot is its eye, which periodically opens, and if you get close to this thing, those tentacles do some serious damage. It also just looks so imposing, stomping around the room, towering above all the other Flood forms. It is such a shame this thing was cut, but thank God it's back. Here's to it, hopefully, fingers crossed, being resurrected in the next Halo campaign. My finger's about to break, I'm crossing so hard. Jumping back over to Chief's story, Delta Halo is mostly the same, aside from one slightly altered encounter, which I absolutely loved. So when you get to that really comfy waterfall area, a phantom comes in above the treetops that Cortana tells you to hide from.
Phantom, stay out of sight.
You know, hiding from patrols in a jungle like this gave me real MGS3 vibes, real Vietnam vibes. I love this. This is just another one of the many stealth sections that Bungie clearly had to cut from Halo 2 that would have made this already 10 out of 10 experience somehow even better. Not to cross my fingers again because I think they are about to break, but here's to some Metal Gear style stealth in the next Halo campaign, please. When you descend under the lake in Regret, there's some pretty cool cut dialogue from both Cortana and, brace yourself, Chips Dubbo that's finally made its way into the game. Now, I'm not going to butcher this audio myself, just take a listen.
Block our access to sacred sites, damage holy relics.
And people say
For their
I've got a big head.
transgressions, the humans shall be hunted until none remain alive.
Oh man, he is so dead.
Man, how can you hear that and think that Chips Dubbo doesn't deserve to be in every single Halo game? I don't want to cross my fingers again, they're about to snap, but please. Now, the ending of Regret's fight has been spruced up a little bit. It's only a small detail, but once you've killed Regret, the Covenant don't just stand still and the level doesn't just randomly end. Instead, hordes of Covenant reinforcements hurriedly come flooding through the doors as you try and leave the temple. It's as if Regret had ordered some kind of distress signal for reinforcements when he saw Chief enter the room, and they're only just arriving a few minutes too late. It's another one of those small changes that just makes the world feel more kind of cohesive and believable and in line with the overarching story. Like the Covenant were desperately trying to save Regret, but they were a few seconds too late. Really great addition. Over in the Sentinel Wall on a Sacred Icon, which was, I think, one of Halo 2's more underrated levels, there's a small addition early on that always seemed like it was missing from the official game. Well, I guess now we know that it was missing from the game. Allied Brutes. Normally here, you just link up with a Jackal and maybe a few Grunts, but now you've got a Brute on your side as well, which, as far as I'm aware, is actually the only time in the entire Halo franchise that you've had an Allied Brute, which is pretty cool. Halo history right here. And you also get a ton more Allied Covenant as well. You definitely get more allies here, because I built up what felt like a mini militia in this initial section. Now, granted, the Flood did annihilate this little militia when we made it over the gondola ride, but it was still really cool having that little ragtag group of survivors by my side from the previous failed attempts to break through the wall. In original Halo 2, you just see dead bodies everywhere, which is really cool set dressing, but it's cool having some of the survivors of those dead body excursions fight alongside you. But don't worry, they didn't die in vain. This next resurrection requires a little bit of context. So, in original Halo 2, there's a one-of-a-kind Sentinel that only spawns on Quarantine Zone, nowhere else, and for some reason, this Sentinel fires needles, as if it's just holding a needler. Now, this thing is left over from a cut variant of the Sentinel that was going to do something similar, and lo and behold, Vadam has restored this cut Sentinel in all of its glory. The Needless Sentinel has returned. And what's even cooler is that you can now use its weapon, which is a really unique version of the Sentinel Beam that fires those red needles that the Enforcer fires. And I gotta say, this weapon is so fun to use. It sounds great, it looks great, it's satisfying. I kept this thing on me at all times. And then the final cherry on the top of this wildly underrated level is that Vadam has restored the second cut Juggernaut encounter, which again comes with some really cool cut dialogue from Artas and the Elites.
Leader, the Juggernaut, foul and unholy beast.
Speaking of cut dialogue,
Forward, warriors, and fear not pain or death.
For those who fell before us.
Go, officers. I'll follow when our reinforcements arrive.
Chills. The further that you move through Quarantine Zone, you start to realise that the Needless Sentinel Beam isn't the only cut Sentinel weapon that's been restored. Oh, there's more. There's the Sentinel Charge Shot, which is basically a Sentinel railgun, and the Sentinel Grenade Launcher, which is a handheld version of that grenade barrage that the Enforcer does. Now, these spins on the Sentinel Beam are so good, and they basically create like a mini category of Sentinel weapons to go alongside the UNSC and Covenant weapons. Using them against the Flood in particular just feels so right. That charge shot is absolutely perfect for taking down Juggernauts. Another really nice addition is the humans that show up before you reach the gondola. You know, you often get so focused on just blowing stuff up in Quarantine Zone that you forget that this entire level is essentially a race with the humans to reach the index first. And now the Marines are actually present as an enemy, that element of the story feels so much more present in the gameplay and level progression. Also, call me a traitor, but killing humans as the Arbiter does feel kinda cool as well. But not as cool as this new weapon, if you could even call it a weapon. You can now pick up a Jackal shield, like a riot shield, and dual wield it with a single-handed weapon, which feels so badass. I knew that Bungie had plans for this in Halo 2, and so finally getting to use it is so cool. I mean, I'm honestly mind-blown that we've never had this in any official capacity since. Jumping to the level which can only be described as hell on Legendary, Gravemind, the level is mostly the same encounter-wise, but there are a few new smaller additions that are really cool. Notably, the spike grenades. I knew Bungie worked on these for Halo 2 and I knew they were planned, but I never actually knew what their plan was going to be for them until now. So they basically act as a middle ground between a frag and a plasma. They have the explosion and the fuse time of a frag, but stick to targets like a plasma grenade. They aren't quite as unique as Halo 3 spike grenades that launch a barrage of spikes around that ricochet around a room, but they still feel mostly different enough to have a place in the sandbox, so it's kind of a shame they were cut. What wasn't cut, but is radically different to vanilla, however, is the brute shot. Now, I absolutely adore the regular Halo 2 and Halo 3 brute shot. It didn't feel Covenant, but at the same time, it didn't feel human. It felt innately brute. Whereas this early version of the brute shot feels a lot more like a Covenant weapon. So instead of firing the kind of bouncing HE shells, it fires a burst of what appears to be explosive plasma that kind of acts like an impact plasma grenade. It's an interesting insight into an early version of such an iconic weapon, but to be honest, I'm happy we got the version that we got in the end. Towards the end of the level, when the Inamberclad arrives, there's a really cool little cinematic section that's kind of present in the vanilla game, but you can tell that the one in the launch version of Halo 2 was kind of rushed out and not finished properly. Just take a look.
Chief, there were no humans on board. It was filled with flood. Whatever that flood creature was, it had damn good aim.
Now, not to be overly dramatic or look too much into something, but I feel like that extra cut dialogue from Cortana there perfectly encapsulates Halo 2's more serious and kind of emotional tone, along with its also sprinkling of comedy. She sounds horrified when she detects that the entire ship has been infected by the flood, but her delivery when she says that the Gravemind has great aim to, jump the ship inside High Charity is pretty funny. Absolutely fantastic voice acting as per usual from Jen Taylor, and yeah, it's a real shame that lines like that were cut because they're delivered so well. Now, Uprising is already the GOAT Halo 2 level, right? But Vadam's fixed something here that Bungie must have broken in the final version of the game that I swear to God has bugged me since November 15th, 2004. 20 years now. The dying elite is finally fixed.
Brutes have betrayed us. The counselors.
As a kid, it used to trip me out so much that this elite was just a dead body, but was talking, right? I never knew if there was meant to be some other elite somewhere, or if there was another elite somewhere that I just couldn't find that was saying that line, or if the line was meant to be coming out of that dead body or something, but having this little cinematic section fixed finally lays that question to rest in a rather sad way. The elites insert more realistically via a phantom now, rather than drop pods from a non-existent carrier ship. And similar to earlier on, you have so many more allies here, which again I think really fits with the story. I feel like I'm really forming an elite militia here to strike back against the brutes and get bloody revenge on them for their betrayal. The overall push through the caves and the ravines feels fuller, so to speak, and a lot more contextually fitting when you've got more elites by your side.
Mercy even for you. Are there any more?
In the ravines in particular, it really feels like you're building up a guerrilla force and not just fighting with like 2 or 3 elites by your side. It's a very impactful change. And when you step outside for the first time, you're greeted by a really cool new addition.
Let's not make ourselves a target for those scarabs. We'll see through the ravine.
Man, I love that extra elite dialogue as well. Having 2 scarabs guarding the control room makes so much more narrative and contextual sense than just having 1 scarab chilling unmanned like a mile away. These scarabs look so cool in the final cutscene as well, but trust me, their coolness hasn't even come close to peak yet. But more on those in a minute. Back to High Charity, we reach the level, well, High Charity, who would have guessed it? And right from the start, there's a really cool bit of cut Cortana dialogue that's been restored that, I gotta say, right up my alley.
Blood spores have contaminated the city's life support infrastructure. The filtration systems are overloading.
The infection of High Charity is an event that we know offensively little about, and this little extra flavour dialogue, as obvious as it is, just adds so much. The entirety of High Charity's life support system was filled with spores, and also its air filtration systems were overloading as a result. The flood literally corrupted the life support systems. What a terrifying thought. But that's not all the restored Cut Cortana dialogue. Some more plays later on that touches on the wider outbreak aboard High Charity.
The amount of flood biomass is increasing exponentially. There are reports of infestations in every district. If the speed of the flood spread in this tower is any indication, it won't take long for it to overrun the entire city.
And then towards the end, we get even more that gives us an insight into how each member of the Covenant is responding to the Great Schism.
The jackals and drones have declared themselves the servants of the brutes. The hunters have sworn allegiance to the elites. The grunts seem to be neutral, or at least afraid to announce which side they support. Except for truth, the prophets aren't saying a word.
Now, of course, we already knew all of that, but it's so cool actually hearing about different allegiances being struck in the background in-game. It adds even more flavor to the story and more context to what's going on around you. You know, out of all of the cut dialogue, I think this is the one that I'm most sorry that Bungie had to cut. But probably the biggest piece of restored content in this entire mod comes in at the end of High Charity. No longer does Chief just soar through the big green beam of energy to get to the key ship. No. Halo 2's infamously cut Warthog run is back, complete with new cut music as well. Halo 2's very own Warthog run theme, and my god does this theme slap. Now, granted, this Warthog run definitely isn't as strong as Halo 1's or Halo 3's, but the setting is very cool and very unique and sets it apart from the other two. And with this Warthog run, we've now technically had a Warthog run in all three major factions' architecture. UNSC, Covenant, and Foreigners. Completely irrelevant detail, but I just noticed it when I was going through this game, so I figured I'd mention it. You can definitely tell though that Bungie used this Warthog run as something of a precursor to the ideas that they finally brought to life in Halo 3's Warthog run. There are loads of parts of it that do feel really similar in some areas to Halo 3's, but at the same time this run does feel unique. It doesn't feel like Halo 3's 0.5, if you get what I mean. Honestly, play this mod just for the Warthog run, trust me on that. As soon as you hear that theme come in that you've probably not heard before, like I genuinely hadn't heard it before, man, genuine chills, I'm not even kidding. And that brings us to our fateful end at Great Journey. And again, opening right away with the two scarabs in the background of RB and Halfjaw talking is so cool. This shot is so imposing. But the biggest change to Great Journey is the scarab section. No longer do you get in a Banshee, fly through the ravine in 30 seconds, and then just hover for 15 minutes whilst Johnson very slowly and carefully meanders his way through the canyon. No. Now, you get to ride the Scarab halfway at least, with not just elite, but also marine allies as well.
Humans fighting alongside elites? What's next? Front hierarchs? For all I have seen today, I would not be surprised.
This is so cool. It's the only time in Halo 2 where we actually get Marines and Elites fighting side by side. Again, a little precursor to Halo 3. I armed them all up with Furor cannons and just let them go crazy, and just watching Elites and Marines stand side by side and fight on the side of a Scarab was so cool. But that's only half of it. When you get halfway through the Scarab run, you then pick up a bomb that's in the pilot bay of the Scarab, you hop in a Banshee, and then you go on board one of the other two Scarabs to arm the bomb and leave. Man, you can really see where Bungie got their ideas for Halo 3 Scarab encounters with this section. This really does feel like a precursor to those fights. Then, with one of the Scarabs destroyed, you get to watch Johnson annihilate the other Scarab with his own. Seeing them both partially destroyed in the ocean before the control room looks so damn good. And then, one of the changes that we get in the control room encounter is that the Phantom actually follows you to the door and drops off elite allies to raid the control room with you, which again is just a great addition to the gameplay that helps it fit in quite a bit more with the narrative, and it helps make the gameplay and again the level progression feel more consistent with how pushed for time the allies are to stop Tartarus here. I gotta say, I think my favourite thing that this mod kind of resurrects is reducing the gap between the gameplay and the narrative. The two feel a lot closer now, whereas before, the gameplay felt a bit more like a conduit to get you to the next part of the narrative. Not to say that there wasn't narrative in the levels, but there were bits that didn't make as much sense as they do in this version of Halo 2's campaign. But unfortunately, the rest of Great Journey is basically the same as release. Sadly, we still have to watch Tartarus absolutely slaughter the elites with the Fist of Rugs. Man, That's never not heartbreaking. I've played this level like 1,000 times and it's still sad. Still is. And so, those are my favourite elements of Halo 2 Uncut, Bungie's original version of Halo 2's campaign. Let me know your favourite thoughts and changes and additions and resurrected bits of content down below in the comments. And also, do not forget to go and sub to Vengeful Vadam. He does some amazing content on not just Halo mods, but also loads of cut Halo content as well, and old builds of Halo games that are super interesting to dive into. And also, go and download Uncut as well. The link to both are in the description, the Steam Workshop page for Uncut, and also Vadam's channel. Trust me, go and download the mod, go and sub to Vadam. You will not regret it, my friends. You will not regret it. And with that said, let's round this video out here, shall we? I want to give a massive thank you to all of my amazing patrons for the continued support over there, as per usual. And thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll catch you all in the next one.